Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's the former director of college scouting for the Chicago Bears and a contributor to the Ballroom Network. Please welcome Greg Gabriel to the program. Greg, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Well, it's good to be on. I'm really good. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being here. What do you make of the Bears draft, first off?
You know, I'm not one to criticize those things ever. I know, having done it a good part of my adult life, I know exactly how much work goes into it. And what happens with fans and media is, they read the draftnik stuff. And so they assume what the draftniks have is the right stuff. And I'm not trying to say anything negative about them, but they have about 1/3 the information that each individual team has, as far as background, and especially when you get into medical and coaches' reports, talking to the coaches, they make school calls. There's a lot involved where, a lot of the draft analysts, they watch a little tape. Now, there's a few like Move the Sticks, Daniel Jeremiah, who's been in the league. And so he knows what it's all about. But a lot of these other guys, they've never made a school call in their life. So they don't. And it just adds so much more to the information that you get. And you could, you set up, every team sets up a board. I guarantee you, because I've, been in draft rooms for years and years and years, there's no two boards that are ever alike. So when people say, well, why'd they pass him? Because that was the best, this one guy was the best guy on their board. And just because their board's different than, say, the Kansas City Chiefs or the New York Giants, so what? They're all different. And especially when you get into day 3.
You like the strategy by Ryan Poles to go after the best guy available rather than draft by need.
Well, yeah, but in essence, he took need too. I mean, but everybody said, well, we got to get a receiver. They did get a receiver. They got a receiver in the 3rd round. But I said going into the draft, and their biggest need was a corner. And what'd they take first? A corner. And I thought they'd take an offensive lineman, a corner, and a wide receiver somehow in the first 3 picks. If it fell that way, okay, they took a wide receiver, a corner, and a safety, but the safety was the highest guy. And, my thinking was that while they signed the one free agent who was with Tennessee, and so he might have been filled that safety need, but this guy was too good. This guy's an instant starter.
Were you surprised by those first 2 defensive picks, or did you think they were warranted based on what the Bears needed, like you said, a corner?
Well, obviously corner. Yeah. I mean, I like that. And that guy's going to be a player, not a doubt in my mind. In fact, when I was doing tape of all these guys leading up to the draft, where his teammate who went in the 1st round was better today, I can see this guy being better 2 years.
Really?
Yeah. Well, the other guys, he's played more, he's got more experience. And I think this guy, he's just, as he gains experience at the pro level, he's got better traits. And, he's a smart kid. I think he's going to be a top level corner in the NFL.
How much of an impact do you see him making this year in his rookie year?
Oh, I think he's going to be a starter right from the beginning. Teams are going to go after him. It'll probably be similar to the way Jalen Johnson played. His first year. You got to go through the growing pains. And Kyle Fuller, the same thing. Kyle didn't start the first couple games, and then he came in. I think he had 2 or 3 interceptions the first 3 games of his career. So he's going to make an impact. They had to get somebody. People say, well, Thomas Graham can go there. Well, Thomas Graham is a question mark. Not saying he might turn into be a great player, but the little snaps he had last year were not enough to say he's good enough to put out on the corner and start.
Greg Gabriel here on Sports Talk Chicago. Greg, what's your evaluation of Velus Jones Jr., the Bears' wide receiver pick?
He was in my group of wide receivers. I had him as a 3rd round guy. And, to be honest, I looked at it, there was another wide receiver on the board at the same time, Tolbert from South Alabama, who fits that X mold, that Green Bay uses, a tall, got good speed. He's a 4.48, and he's tall, and he's got a ton of production from South Alabama, did well at the Senior Bowl. I thought, okay, that's the better receiver. But then when you throw in the rest of the game, the special teams and the return ability, then it's like, okay, wait, I get it. Because and the way they're going to use him, where Tolbert gives you nothing on special teams. He's not a return guy and never will be a return guy. And that's a huge part of the game. Like, you look at what they drafted, and even some of the free agents, they're multidimensional. They're guys that can do more than one thing. You got a few guys, a running back from Baylor. He can return kicks too. And so you're going to have an interesting battle just between those two guys, and who's going to be the number one return guy. And who cares? As long as they're productive.
How concerning is the age with Velus Jones Jr.? Is going to be 25 by opening day. Is that a problem to you or not really?
How about this? That not one person is mentioned outside of me. He's 11 months older than Devin Hester was when Devin was a rookie.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Did that affect Devin Hester?
Not at all, obviously.
Okay.
Right.
So, that you know what? Years ago, it was a big deal because you had control of your players for basically their whole career. That's not the case now. You got 4 years, and then at the end of 4 years, you got to make a decision. You're either going to re-up them at a huge sum of money, in most cases, or you're going to let them go in free agency. So the age doesn't matter. It's not as big a factor as it was. And if they use him the way they say they're going to use him, and so he's going to be like, the guy at San Francisco, and he's going to be a little bit of running back, a little bit of slot receiver, a little bit outright receiver. And, if he's anywhere close to Debo, you might only get 4 or 5 years out of him, because if you're carrying the ball, that takes a toll on your body.
How much stock do you put into that comparison of Debo Samuel to Jones?
Well, he's done it. He's got the skill set to do it. To say that he can do it at the NFL level, that's a wait and see. Nobody knows that. I'm going to say this, though, just about the wide receiver group as whole, because you turn on the radio and you listen to talk radio and you read the thing, and everybody said they don't have any receivers. I think personally they're a lot better than what the average fan and what most people in the media think. Byron Pringle is a hell of a receiver. He just, he had to wait his chance to play in Kansas City. And Equanimeous St. Brown, go back and look at his tape when he was coming out of Notre Dame. His problem was not the talent. His problem was, I think and I'm throwing a dart at the wall here because I've never met the guy personally, but from talking to people I know at Notre Dame, he probably felt a little entitled, a little bit spoiled the way he was brought up, and just wasn't ready to be a pro. And you look at Green Bay's depth chart, he's a damn good receiver now. And, so he had to wait in line. Now, Luke Getsy, the Bears offensive coordinator, he's seen this guy every day in practice for the last 3 years. He knows exactly what this guy could do. And so he was the second receiver they signed. They signed him right after they signed Pringle. Do you think they would have done that had Getsy not signed off on it, knowing what he can do?
Exactly. That makes total sense.
Yeah. And people, the media, yeah, I get it. You don't have that production. But again, go back and take the time to look at his Notre Dame tape and see some of the stuff he did at Notre Dame. And he's a lot better now. You just watch him running routes, now as compared to when he was in college, it's an entirely different player. And he's that big. He's 6'5", 215 pounds. Now, his younger brother isn't anywhere near as athletic as this guy. And he's not as big. And he came in as a rookie last year in Detroit and had 90 catches. Now, I'm just thinking from the standpoint of competitiveness within the household. It's going to drive Equanimous a little bit. Catch up, I'm not going to have little brother surpass me.
Do you buy the argument that Darnell Mooney is a bona fide number one wide receiver?
No, but I know he's a two, and he's a damn good two. But there's a lot of people who are saying he's not a two, and I can't swear. They're full of it. Yeah. And the guy was a leading receiver last year. He caught passes for over 1,000 yards in a horrible offense. He doesn't drop the ball. He works his ass off. He's got great football character. He runs a 4.38. Yeah. Does he have ideal size? No. So what? So some of the other guys they brought in got some of those big bodies. And he is going to be, he might be the Bears number one this year, but you know what? There's teams in the National Football League that don't have legitimate number ones. There's not 32 legitimate number ones in the National Football League.
Do you think the Bears are fully committed to Justin Fields based on the moves they made in the draft and how their roster looks moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely they are. And, put it this way, these guys wouldn't have got the job if they weren't fully committed. They had to sign off on that in order to get the job. So I got to tell you, John, I hate the negativism that the media puts out because, and they do it here and it's nationally. They pry off the negative instead of looking at the positives. And so they're saying, well, Justin Fields had, struggled some last year. Of course he did. But was that all his fault? No. A lot of it was the design of the offense. Some of it was, you didn't solidify the offensive line as far as who was going to play until the second half of the season. You had a lot of injuries. The big question mark this year, I think, is going to be how good that line comes together. But part of it is you got a different philosophy between the two coaches. I've worked with Juan Castillo before, and I got a lot of respect for him. But Juan wants these big elephants playing for him that don't have great maneuverability. Well, if you look at the testing numbers of some of these guys when they had their pro days, because there was no combine a year ago, they tested pretty good. Their numbers are good, but they had them, and I'll give you a perfect example, Larry Borum. Borum was like at Missouri, maybe 350 pounds. He knew he was too heavy. So he drops down to 320 pounds for his pro day and moved around really, really well. But Juan says, you're too skinny. He wanted him back up at 235. And this year, and I know the program, Jimmy Arthur's the new strength coach. He worked with Rusty Jones when I was there. And Rusty, as far as I'm concerned, is the best in the business. He's with the Colts now. He's been a lead strength coach for, well over 30 years in the National Football League. He's real big on nutrition and flexibility, proper dieting, but also the one thing that he's huge on, and Jimmy follows that same criteria, is percentage of body fat. And so we had this machine when I was there, and I'm sure they have it. I don't know if they still have that same one because I don't know how long they last, but I guarantee you they got another one. It's called the Bod Pod, and it looks like an egg, and you sit in it, and there's a window, and air circulates while you're in there. In a matter of about 3 or 4 minutes, it gives you your body fat, your muscle mass, your percentage of body fat, everything about your body. Like I say, within a couple minutes. And then they have criteria for each position. So a defensive lineman can have a maximum of X amount of body fat. Okay, an offensive lineman, a maximum of, say around 23% or 24% or something like that. You want your defensive backs and your wide receivers to be in single digits, 7-8%. And if they can get lower than that, great. So now you're looking at the lean weight, which is their muscle weight, and then their total weight. And that's what's going on now with these guys, the way they're working out. They're getting their bodies to the right dimensions, the right percentage of body fat. And weight really doesn't, Ryan Pohl said, well, some of these guys got to lose weight. What they got to lose is body fat. And so if you got, and you're assigned two things in this program, and it's you're assigned a percentage of body fat and a weight. Well, you can be above the weight if your body fat is okay. So let's say you're assigned a weight of 320 pounds and body fat percentage of 22%. Well, if you come in at 325 and you're 21%, you're fine. Because you're not 5 pounds overweight, because that's 5 more pounds of muscle you have because of the, your percentage of the fat is less. You follow what I'm saying on that?
Oh, I do. So do you think this Bears offensive line could get to that point? Are they maneuverable enough? Do you think they could be more in shape by game one to help out Justin Fields?
It's not really in shape. It's having the right body composition. They're going to be in shape. They're all in shape. It's just the right composition, and it leads to longer careers, and it also leads to less injuries. Because I know this program very, very well, because we had it for all those years, when Lovey was here and Rusty was here. And, Rusty was like, there's certain guys, and I'll give you one example. Nate Vasher.
Of course. Nate
Vasher was a fat guy. Okay. Now, Nate would probably punch me for saying that, but or he'd start laughing because he knew it. But that was just him. No matter what he did, he was 13.5% body fat. He was about 6% too high, and he couldn't get it down. No matter what he did, no matter what they did in the weight room. And finally, because I remember, we're thinking about drafting him, and Rusty's looking at it, he goes, he's too fat. He can't play the position. He's got way too much. I'll never get that off him. And he turned out to be a Pro Bowl corner. He's the exception to the rule. But and you have that every once in a while. But for the most part, guys like Peanut Tillman and stuff, they're 6.5% body fat. These are lean guys.
That's fascinating. I just have to say, Greg Gabriel here on Sports Talk Chicago. I obviously didn't know about any of this stuff. I've not been in a scouting department or in the Bears front office in any capacity. It's really interesting to know that all these different criteria are going to be applied to draft picks and even to free agent signings. I never knew this stuff before. There's
a lot involved. I mean, you got psychological tests, you got intelligence tests, interviews. Interviews are always huge in the draft process. There's guys, and I've sat in literally thousands of interviews between all-star games and combines and bringing guys in on those 30 visits, and over the years, and when a guy is BSing you, and when a guy's being honest. And a lot of times you sit in the interview, especially if the guy's got something controversial in the past, you always know what the right answer is before you get into the interview. So then so then you hit him with it. He doesn't know the right answer. And so you can find out a real lot about the guy, because if he's lying to you, you know it right away. Never ask a question you don't know the answer to.
What's the weirdest interview you've been a part of, if you can share it?
There's been some that, there's a couple stories. There's some guys that as soon as we got done at the combine, regardless of how good the player is, we were done with them. We don't want them. Because
really?
And there's other guys say, "Wait, hey, let's do some more work on this. This guy's really an interesting guy." But there was, in the year we took Rex, what we did, we didn't bring Rex in as part of the 30 visits, and we brought in Kyle Bowler, we brought in Sims, we brought in some other guys, everybody and their uncle thought we were going to take Kyle Bowler because we let him talk to the press. We rejected Kyle Bowler at the combine. All that was for show.
Wow.
Part of the games you play. And what happened at the combine was, we're sitting in the interview, and for the first part of his career, I don't even remember who his coach was, but for his last year at California, Jeff Tedford came in, who was a very good offensive mind and a great quarterback coach. He had Aaron Rodgers after Bowler. And so we're talking to him, and he was like a 49% and then a 52% completion percentage, and California was losing. And we said to him, well, what was it like? He goes, well, I didn't like it. Well, how did you handle it? He said, well, I walk around campus with a hoodie and had the hood up so nobody knew who I was. Right then and there, with that answer, you're done. Because a quarterback's got to be, it's got to be outgoing and be your leader. And yet this guy was trying to hide. So we just knew right away, personality-wise, he didn't handle adversity very well. Tried to hide from it.
Who's the best personality you came across in those interviews?
Oh God, I'd have to sit down and think about it because there's been a ton. A lot of really outstanding interviews.
Greg Gabriel still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Greg, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, scouting. How'd you get into scouting from the beginning?
Reality is I wanted to. I mean, I was a player. I didn't, I wasn't good enough to play in the National Football League, but I played minor league football from the time I graduated college, 1974 through 1981. I was a small, skinny running back. And back then, it was a long time ago. You didn't have to be 220 pounds, but I could run pretty good. And, the coach I was playing for was working part-time for the Buffalo Bills. His name was Gene Zinni, and Gene passed a couple of years ago. But he, I said, I want to do that. The work he was, what happened was is Buffalo, back then, this was 1981. So Buffalo, San Francisco, Dallas, and Seattle were all in the same combine. It was called Quadra at that time, and it doesn't exist anymore. And back then you didn't have video like you have now, and nothing was digitized. We walked around with 16 millimeter Kodak projectors, and you took those with you from school to school. So it was a pain in the butt, if you know what I mean. And so they used local people, this combine did, to supplement their scouts grades by just getting grading tape. They get the film. Wasn't tape, it was film. You get the film and you have to grade literally every play. And I did that for 2.5 years for them. And, by the into my third season, after 2 full years, then Buffalo started sending me out. So I was working part-time for them for 2.5 years. And then beginning of 84, I was working for National Football Scouting, which is the combine that runs, or the scouting combine that runs the combine and stuff. And then that led to a job with the Giants later that year.
What made your Bears tenure so successful?
Well, part of it, Jerry Angelo and I worked in New York together for 3 years. And then Jerry went down to Tampa Bay as the director of player personnel, but we already had developed a very good friendship. I mean, it was like, we're really good friends throughout the years. So I knew if Jerry got the job here, I was getting the job here. I knew that when he was going through the interview process. So it was just a matter of, I know when, I think it was June 13th or June 12th, 2001, that he got announced as the general manager. And I knew I'd be in Chicago like 2 days later, and I was. So, but I've enjoyed it. And it's funny because I always had the Midwest as a scout. So I always spent a lot of time in Chicago. And it was just like this, every time I'd be driving through, going to Northwestern or Northern Illinois or whatever, or driving up to Wisconsin from Northwestern, I was like, I got a feeling I'm going to be here. And it was weird. But then I remember after I got the job, I go, yeah, I guess I was right.
How do you know to draft guys like Devin Hester, Lance Briggs, the others you picked? How did you make that determination?
Well, it's through all the work, and it's never one guy's opinion. It's always a bunch of opinions, and you get together and you put. It's really a group grade. You might have one guy's way high, another guy could be real low, and some other guys are in the middle. And that's basically where the final grade is going to be, somewhere in the middle. I've always taken the approach when I was the scouting director here was that if I had a difference of opinion, a big difference of opinion with one of our scouts, either I was a lot higher or a lot lower, then that meant the two of us got to watch film together. And I would try to watch film in through his eyes. I knew what he thought of the player, what he thought the strengths and the weaknesses were. He knew what I thought the player was. And so we'd watch film together and then try to come together on a grade that we both could agree on.
Was it unanimous on Devin Hester or Lance Briggs or the other Pro Bowlers that you guys drafted?
Oh, yeah. That whole draft was about getting Devin Hester in 2006. We traded out of the first round because we had to get a defensive back. And I think we didn't have a third round pick. And so, I'm going to say a week before the draft, 5 days before the draft, we started looking at, okay, how far can we drop down and still get certain players that we like that we knew would be available? And, you draw that line in the sand, so to speak, and then I call everybody in between. And you don't say a lot. You just say, hey, look, our guy may not be there. We may want to move. And if that's the case, just wanted to let you know that our pick may be for sale come draft day. And you just sit back and you wait because they're going to call. And we had 9 calls. And it got hectic because there was 3 teams that really wanted the pick. And I'm on one phone, Jerry Angelo's on another phone, Bobby DePaul's the pro director's on another phone, and we're trying to get this done, and we're getting ready to be on the clock. And so it turned out that Buffalo we felt the best deal. And so we went with them. The Colts really wanted the pick, and they ended up making a trade like a slot later to get the guy they wanted. They wanted a running back who ended up busting. I can't even remember his name. But we were able to make that deal with Buffalo. We took Daniel Manning with that first pick in the second round, and then we got Devin with the second pick.
Was that the best pick of your career, Devin Hester?
No, look, we drafted 12 Pro Bowlers when I was here. So, that anytime you draft guys in the Pro Bowl, and that's in 9 drafts, we got 12 Pro Bowlers. So that's more than one a year. And that one draft, Briggs and Tillman were the same draft. They went to the Pro Bowl, so we had some good drafts. I mean, a lot of times at the top, we swung and missed a little bit. We had a home run with Tommy Harris until he got hurt. But that's another. I mean, in that draft, we went in. We were changing the defense. Dick Duran was here. Greg Blosh was the defensive coordinator, and we had a very big defense then. We had Ted Washington and Keith Traylor playing the defensive tackle, and Philip Daniels was one of the defensive ends. The lightest guy of those 3 was Philip Daniels. He was about 315. Washington and Traylor were both over 350, and I'm being nice saying 350. The only guy that had, any size and speed was Alex Brown, who was a rookie that previous year. Alex was about 250. So we knew, we're changing the scheme, going to the same defense that they have now, and you have to have an entirely different type of player. And so we went in and the guy we wanted was Tommy Harris, but we had like the 13th pick. We figured we aren't going to get him at 13. And we didn't have ammo to move up, and we lucked out. How often do he's the first defensive lineman that went off the board that year at 13. That never happens. It was just it was luck.
How close were you to not drafting any of these Pro Bowlers you're mentioning?
No, I don't say that's part of the plan. You go in there with a plan to get some of these guys. And so, and you figure out what you got to do to get them and where you got to draft them to get them. And so, Lance, we really liked. And an interesting, and I've told the story before, an interesting story about Lance is what, we drafted him when Dick was here. And obviously played real good. But when Lovey gets here, now Lovey didn't know Lance, and he's the head coach. And I had in my office, the draft cards from each one of the players that were on the team. It was basically, I had the depth chart, on my board in my office. And so he's looking at it and he sees Lance Briggs, and he was 6'1" and change and 240 something pounds, and he ran 4.78. And Lovey said, he can't play for me. Why not? He's too slow. Now he came from, he was Tampa Bay, where they originated this defense, and Derek Brooks was the original will linebacker, and Warren Sapp was the original 3 technique. And so, that's what he wanted. And Derek Brooks is like a 4.5 guy. And so Jerry comes in, we're talking, I said, Lovey, he may have timed 4.78, but he plays 4.55. Trust us, he's going to be fine. And so he goes, okay, I'll go with you guys and see. But he was doubtful. I mean, he still had a lot of doubt. He's even thinking of putting Urlacher at the will spot. And then once he got into camp and you saw what everybody could do, it never was brought up again.
How did it feel to assemble a near Super Bowl winning team?
I mean, that's always very, very satisfying. We didn't get the job done. We got there, but we didn't finish it. I thought on the opening kickoff we were okay, but then after that it went downhill. But I had been to 3 Super Bowls with the Giants in my 7. 2 of them were winners, 1 was a loss. So anytime you get to the Super Bowl, it is just, I don't know, wonderful. The satisfaction you get out of it. I mean, my mentor, who is now departed, was a guy by the name of Norm Pollum, who was with Buffalo for a number of years. And he's the guy who gave me my first job. And Norm was in the league 30 something years. He never got to a Super Bowl. And so there's a lot of quality people in the league that have never made it to a Super Bowl. I'm lucky I got to 4. I won 2 and lost 2. I'd like to get back hook on with somebody and go one more time just so I can break the tie. But I want, I want the winning tie, not the losing tie.
Are there any teams interested in you? Or are you yourself out there?
I think that that day's passed.
Why do you say that?
My age. How old do you think I am?
There's never a good answer to that question, so I'm just I'll leave that one alone.
Hey, no, if something comes up, something comes up.
Greg, before we finish up today, last question. What's the funniest moment that you've been a part of in your career?
Oh, God, I don't know. I mean, that you should have asked me that one yesterday so I could think about it. I mean, there's my whole career, I think, was very satisfying. You meet great people. They're still, my friends to this day. And it's not just guys I work with. It's guys you meet, all around the league. And, like Dave Gettleman took a lot of heat with the Giants. Dave Gettleman's a close friend. He didn't do well as a GM, but I met Dave in around 85 or 86. He's working for Buffalo. So I'm from Buffalo. We were both living in Buffalo. I've lived in Buffalo the entire time I worked for the Giants. And so Dave and I did things socially together. We were on a lot of school calls together. So it's a relationship that goes way back. And we worked together in New York for a while. and before I came here. So regardless of how he did as a GM, that's irrelevant to me. You know, he's a good friend. And a lot of these guys that are still in the league are good friends.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate the time. Amazing insights, by the way. I know I learned so much, and looking forward to the next time we chat, too.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.